Hi everyone, I'm JJ Redick and you're listening to The Old Men and the Three. Today's show, I'm excited to share, is part of the Dell Technologies Small Business Podference. Small businesses are constantly looking for ways to advance their marketing strategies and grow their companies. That's why Dell Technologies assembled an all-star lineup of podcasters to create this year's virtual conference to share advice and inspiration for small businesses. I hope that you find this episode both inspiring and useful as we work together to support small businesses. Dell Technologies is here to help safeguard your business with modern devices and Windows 10 Pro and provide relevant content for your business's success. To find more participating podcasts, search for Dell Technologies Small Business Podference on the Odyssey app, Spotify, or Apple Podcast at the end of this episode. All right, let's welcome in my dear friend, one of my favorite people in the world, Ben Winston. Ben, this is, I believe, the fourth time that I've had you on my podcast, our podcast now, but we had you on twice with Yahoo, I think, once with The Ringer, and now on The Old Man and the Three for a special bonus episode presented by Dell. So we're going to talk a lot about just the last year, the challenges of COVID for your production company, Fullwell 73, and the challenges of producing The Late Late Show, which is a nightly show that you've had to do for the last year during COVID. Before we get to that, I think it's always important to reiterate the story of how we met.
Am I supposed to reiterate?
Yeah, you're going to tell the story.
Well, firstly, I'm very honored to be back. It's been a while, I'll be honest. What insults me slightly is that you were always very happy to have me on when it was Ringer, when it was Yahoo. It was like I was a regular. And then suddenly you get your own podcast that you own. I am nowhere to be seen. You're all up in Stacey Abrams' grill. You're pretending that, you know about Bob Iger's history. You're like flirting with all these others. And then suddenly in a random special about COVID, suddenly I get invited. It's an absolute shambles and a disgrace. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if it's you're to blame or Tommy. I'm not sure either way. But the only positive about doing this one is that with the other podcast that you've done, I've never been sent sneakers. And that is.
Let's go.
Do you know what I mean? Branded. How big time are you that you guys have your own brand of shoes? That is magnificent.
Do you guys have late show sneakers?
Of course we don't have sneakers. We're a TV show. How do you have one for being a podcast? I couldn't get over it when they arrived in the post. We hardly have a late show sweater, and you're sending shoes up, and you've done 2 podcasts. I couldn't believe it, but they're very nice. You can see by how white they are. Either I'm looking after them really well, or they're making their debut today. I'll let you decide. Yeah, we met when I first moved to Los Angeles about 7 years ago, right? And we were in a hotel together, and we were by the pool next to each other most days, and I'm British, so I never say hello to anybody, let alone when I'm on holiday, but on vacation. But yeah, I think we shared a cab, right, to a restaurant. It was an expensive cab. I'd seen you, didn't know who you were, and because I didn't follow basketball until that point, because I'd lived in England and my whole life. And then I went to the hotel lobby and said, oh, I'd like a cab to Flora Farms. And they said, oh, it's going to be $100 because they wait there and to take you all the way back. I was like, $100, that's a lot. And then you and your wife Chelsea went to the same desk and said, hey, we'd like a cab to Flora Farms. And I suddenly went, oh, now I will talk to him because it means I can only pay $50. And so that was to save $50, I struck up a conversation with you and said, hey, how about we share a cab? And to be fair, we have spoken most days since, and it's I love you dearly, and even if you don't have me on this new podcast of yours very often. So,
Tommy, for like 3 days before, I think we were celebrating my birthday and our anniversary at Ventanas in Cabo, and for 3 days I saw this really, really good-looking British guy walking around who wouldn't really acknowledge anyone. He just looked very stuffy, and it turns out he's the opposite of that. It's just great.
Were you intimidated to talk to him, JJ?
Well, no, I wasn't. But he definitely had the look across his face that just, I'm on holiday, please don't mess with me. We get in the cab together. We realize we both are living in Los Angeles. We realize we're both transplants in Los Angeles. That was in June, and by Thanksgiving of that year, you and Mary were coming. You were at my house for Thanksgiving.
There's two things I remember about that trip. One is I had a moment that was very Notting Hill, and I don't know if you've seen the movie Notting Hill, where Hugh Bonneville's character, I think it's Hugh Bonneville, he says to Julia Roberts, "What do you do for a living?" He says, "Oh, I'm in movies." He's like, "Oh, well done." I had that sort of moment when I said to JJ in the back of this cab, I said, "So what do you do?" And he said, "I play basketball." And I looked at him like he was an utter idiot. And I went, "No, I mean, what do you do for a living? I don't mean your hobbies." And he went, "No, I play in the NBA." And I was like, "Oh, well done. Oh, good." And the other thing I remember about it was DeMarcus Cousins was also staying there that same week. And him and his girlfriend or his wife, I'm not sure which, they had donkey rides out on the beach every day. And the donkey, you could see every time DeMarcus Cousins went down to the beach to have his donkey ride, the donkey would be like, "Oh, not again, please." And there'd be like this divot in the back of the donkey when DeMarcus Cousins would like climb on. But that's what I remember about that trip. But it was magnificent. Anyway, very lovely to be here.
Tommy, a couple days ago, Ben sent me his bio, just so that I had everything that he's done, so that our listeners can kind of get a sense of what type of career that he's had. So we should just kind of run through a few of these. I think it's important to kind of provide some context.
It's quite long. Your IMDb, we were looking at it a couple days ago. JJ's going to run through it. It takes a while to get through. There is a lot there. What
do you want me to say, Tommy? You know,
they're just JJ. Go run it.
All right, so run it. You don't need to run it.
Do it. Okay, no, we need to set the stage.
Set the stage. Set it.
First of all, you're the partner and co-founder of Full Well 73. It's a production company that's based in the UK. You run it with four of your lifelong friends. By day, you're the showrunner for the Late Late Show with James Corden on CBS. You've been nominated
with Rob Crabb. We run it together.
Okay.
It's not just me. It's me and Rob Crabb.
Okay. All right.
Shout out to Rob. Anyway, Carry on. Keep going. He'll listen, and he's amazing. So I don't want him to go, "Oh, hey, we do that together. Why are you taking?"
Sure. I should have mentioned Rob. 24 Emmy nominations, 9-time winner. You hold the record for most individual Emmy nominations in a single year with 8 in 2019. You co-creator of Carpool Karaoke, co-creator of Drop the Mic. You've done music specials with the likes of Bruno Mars and many others. One Direction music videos, One Direction specials. Like it literally spans the globe, and it spans a lot of different genres.
Sports, music, everything, live events. What have you not done?
I feel like we're trying to justify to our listeners why I've been. I feel like you didn't need this sort of thing for Stacey Abrams or Bob Iger, and I feel like you're trying to sell it. Your listeners have tuned in and they've gone, "It isn't Drew Holiday. I mean, this is not a baller. It's not someone I've ever heard of." And so you're doing your best to keep the listeners there, and I appreciate that, but I feel patronized. But I've had some fun. It's been great. What do you want me to say? It's all good. Yes, everything's.
So we're gonna talk a little bit about the two big projects that you've had this year. In addition, of course, to the Late Late Show, and the two big projects were producing the Grammys. And this is your first time being essentially the showrunner for that. You had co-produced, I think, the last 2 prior years.
Well, I'd sort of understudied.
Yes.
Yeah, they asked me to do it a couple of years ago, and Ken Ehrlich, who'd done it for 40 years, he was the EP of that show. And so I think they wanted me to come on board for the year before I took over, just to sort of, because it's such a monster of a show. It's 3.5 hours of live TV. It's 24 live performances. It's awards. It's clips. So I think that rather than me like just jumping in and taking over when I didn't really understand the show, I benefited hugely from being around it, watching what was amazing and I didn't need to change, and what I thought, oh, maybe I could do that a bit differently. So yes, but this was my first year doing it, and to do it in when the Grammys was for the first time, not in Staples or not in front of 15,000 people in the stadium. It was a very different year to be taking over, but it was a good challenge.
The other big project is the Friends reunion show, which I
Yes.
believe you just finished shooting recently.
Yes,
Correct.
that is correct. We did.
All right. You have so much stuff going on. It's hard to keep track. Can you give us just the listener just sort of a brief overview of Full Well 73, what you guys do, sort of the structure of your company, and sort of what projects you generally go after?
Yeah, I think that, well, it's a company based in the UK and US. There was 4 of us who ran it, lifelong friends. It was me and my closest friend from when I was a kid, Gabe Turner, his brother Ben Turner, their first cousin Leo Perlman, and the 4 of us essentially, we had an idea for a film when we were straight out of college, straight out of university, and it was about a group of street kids who were unbelievable soccer freestylers. They could do anything with a ball, and we had this idea that, and they used to raise money by just hustling on the street for like $1 here and there, and that's how they got by. That's how they earned a living, and they wanted to pay tribute to their hero, who's Diego Maradona, because he was the all-time sort of rock and roll, didn't give a shit sort of footballer. And so we came up with this idea for a documentary film that they wanted to travel with no money for food, accommodation, travel, just every night hustling on the street performing, busking, to see if they could meet Diego Maradona. And we made the film of that. We didn't know what we were doing. I think I was 23, 24 years old. We were traveling around the world with a camera. They managed to get a free flight to New York. They traveled overland through North Central South America to find Diego Maradona and perform for him. We came back to England and of course they fell out along the way. They split up. It was supposed to be a self-contained movie. And on one day on the shoot, I remember one of us was in Sao Paulo, one of us was in Buenos Aires, one of us was in Vegas, and my sister was filming for us in Leeds in England. It had become such a crazy documentary. And we came home with 200 hours of footage that we had filmed in 6 weeks on the road with them. We cut this film down. It was called In the Hands of the Gods. It became the biggest release ever of a UK documentary in the UK. And we were not commercially, it didn't do great, but it was in every cinema in the UK. And we were having this big Leicester Square premiere, and they turned Leicester Square, which is almost like Times Square in the UK, they turned it into a green carpet for football. And we were kids, and we were like, wow, we've got this movie out in the cinema that was getting 5-star reviews everywhere. And suddenly we were like, well, we might as well carry on this company, because truthfully, we only launched the company to protect an idea. We had an idea that we again, when we were in college with these kids, which was almost like Jackass with sport. It was an entirely different idea to In the Hands of the Gods. And we pitched it to MTV. And MTV essentially, I don't know if this is libelous to say it, but they sort of stole it from us. They said, we love this idea. We think it's great, but we're going to do it without you because your company is worth £1. And we were kids, and we were like, how do we fight them? And so in the end, we just decided actually that loss, the show, that being taken away from us, it made us almost double down and go, well, we're going to make Full Well something. And it sort of propelled us on this journey of In the Hands of the Gods. And then off the back of In the Hands of the Gods, lots of talent wanted to work with us. James Corden wanted to work with us. There was a huge boy band at the time in the UK called JLS, and they wanted to work with us. And David Beckham had seen some stuff that we did, so we started shooting some promos for him. And so suddenly we became this company that worked with a lot of talent. And One Direction was one of those people who wanted to work with us, and that was before they were anything. And then over that 7 years that they became the biggest band on the planet, the stuff that we were making for $100,000, suddenly we were making the Sony movie that grossed nearly $80 million. So we sort of grew with the talent that we started making shows for. And James Corden had been one of my closest mates since we were 18. We met when I was a PA getting people coffee on a small scripted show. And when he got the offer of the Late Late Show, said to me, they're looking for a producer to make the show. Because actually, I was thinking about this the other day. I had dinner with somebody in television, and they asked me, how did you end up in America? And I hadn't even thought about this story, and I remembered it. So James had said to CBS, look, there's this producer in the UK called Ben Winston. There's this company called 473. I've done a lot of work with them. I'd really love you to meet them. So Les Moonves was sort of the godfather of television, and he ran CBS. He used to run Warner Brothers when Warner Brothers, cast Friends and ER, and then he takes over CBS. He makes it the #1 network in America. He was without question the most powerful man in television. And I remember I get this phone call from James saying, look, they'll meet you. They're going to meet you to you guys running the Late Late Show. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So I remember taking Mary, when me and Mary went to the pub. My wife is Meredith, and we went to the pub that night, and I said, I'm going to go to LA for a day, and I'm meeting Leslie Moonves for dinner to discuss me running the Late Late Show, full well running it. And she was like, amazing. Who's Leslie Moonves? And I was like, he's the most powerful man in TV. And so I remember, I think I went and thought for 3 days, what should I wear? And I think I got my hair cut and I had a shave, and I was like, okay, I've got to be ready. But this is a big moment. I made TV shows in the UK, and suddenly I was being flown out, paid for by CBS to go and meet Les Moonves to potentially take over one of the 5 network late night shows. There's one on ABC, there's 2 on NBC, there's 2 on CBS. They are the 5. There's loads of other amazing shows, including yours, Tommy, too, with Deezus and Mero. But there's 5 network ones, and so I was very aware of that history and heritage. So I flew out to meet him, and I was supposed to meet him at 7:30 at Sunset Tower, and I'm thinking this is a big moment, and I've and I was staying in some hotel on Sunset Boulevard, really trendy one where they have no furniture and they think that's cool. It was one of those. You wake up and you think you've been robbed, and actually no, it's just cool to have a white blanket. And I was like, I'm in LA, I'm in Hollywood, I've made it, it's Tinseltown. And I walk into Sunset Tower, and the French maitre d's there, and he's doesn't looking at me like I don't recognize this guy, so I'm not going to be nice to him. And I'm like, oh, I'm here to have dinner with Leslie Moonves. And I was nervous. My hands were a bit sweaty, I remember. And he's like, you're here for Leslie Moonves? And I was like, yes, I am. He's like, come straight this way. Sounding like, everybody else is pushed out the way if you're Les's guest. Forget about it. Women just pushed with their martini glasses to the side. And I walk, and I can see Les, and he's checking his phone and whatever, and I can see him there sat at the table, and walks across, and my heart's going, okay, here we go. This will be fun, right? I'm meeting Les to talk about this Late Late Show and blah blah blah. And I sit down at the table, and I say, hey, I'm Ben. Very nice to meet you. And he says, good to meet you. And in that good to meet you, that 4 words, my heart absolutely sunk, because I realized in that split second that he was doing a favor to James Corden. I realized that in that moment, he wasn't meeting a 31-year-old from Britain to take over the late night show on the network. He was meeting it because the guy who had signed to do it, James Corden, had said, hey, will you meet my mate? And Leslie goes, sure, I'll meet you, mate. And in that moment, I felt embarrassed in a way, because I was like, first I'd spent some good money on a jacket, but also I was naive to think on that plane ride when I'm traveling first class and sipping a champagne on the plane that actually this was a realistic thing. And I felt like, I should have protected my heart in a way and known that this was not necessarily a realistic thing, as somebody who'd never produced anything in America before and only had credits in Britain. And of course, why wouldn't he say yes to the meeting when you're new talent who you've just signed? So I sort of sat there, and he looked at the menu, and we small talked for a little bit, but I couldn't really get. But just for the record, he was unbelievably polite to me. He absolutely, I want to say, was not rude in any way. I had just realized that this is one of the busiest, most important men in TV. And I was, without question, the least important meeting of the day that he had on a very, very busy day. But I want to definitely clarify, it wasn't him being disrespectful or rude in any way. I just sort of felt naive about it. So we sat there, and I sort of, made small talk with him, and he asked where I lived and what I was up to, and was more interested in the menu in a way, and I was too. I was pretending to read the menu, whereas all I was thinking was, what an idiot I've been. And so we ordered food, and something happened inside of me during that meeting. And it's really funny thinking about it now. I sort of had been nervous, and I'd been thinking about how I was going to do it, and I was going to be polite and charming. And I was just like, I have no chance of getting this job. And I'm probably never going to meet this guy again. So I'm just not going to give I don't know if we can swear on your podcast. I don't want to.
We can.
I don't want to I just didn't give a fuck. I was like, that's it. This is my one dinner with him, and I'm going to tell him what this show should be. So I said, well, listen, thank you for meeting me to discuss the show. I've had some thoughts on it. Suddenly I was like, front foot. I was like, let's go. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, what are you thinking? And I launched into a monologue of talking about how network television needed to embrace the digital age or it was dead, and how James as a performer would be wasted if he was doing a late night show, and how I'd advised him at first not to do it because I didn't think they'd utilize his talents enough, and how he was a guy who could sing, he could dance, he could act, he could be in sketches, he's interesting and interested. And I launched into this whole speech about who James was and how late night needed somebody like him, and how he was the smartest appointment. But if you get the show wrong, then you'll have always wasted getting the smartest appointment. And I talked about everything from like doing bits online to making the studio 360 with guests walking through, bringing guests out at the same time to make it more of a party. I just went for it, literally went for it. And I remember during it, he sort of became more and more engaged as this sort of monologue went on. And we ate our food. He asked me a few questions. Then Julie Chen arrived, and I sensed that this was I should drop the mic and go, not outstay my welcome. And I just went, well, real pleasure meeting you. And he went, I'll never forget this. He said, I knew I had the right guy in James Corden to host this show. I just don't think I ever realized what the show was. And I walked out, went, well, very nice to meet you. And I walked out thinking, I don't know if that means I've just given him a load of ideas or if I'm going to be running the show. I genuinely wasn't sure. And I got on the plane that next day and I flew back. And by the time I landed, they'd made an offer and it was a great offer. And they were like, no, you're running the show. And from that moment onwards, Leslie always trusted me and Rob to run the show. And that really was the thing that catapulted everything that's happened for us out here. It was that dinner at the Sunset Tower that night that in a way changed my life, really. That changed my life without question. And yeah, it was a really defining moment for me.
That's an amazing story. I love hearing those stories. Ben, you mentioned the online part, and can you just talk about the importance of really your YouTube channel for the Late Late Show, especially in the early days, in terms of growing the show, the buzz for the show? It's essentially how Carpool Karaoke got its start. You eventually sold Carpool Karaoke to Apple. And this just to sort of parallel with something that, Tommy and I are doing, when we were doing shows with Yahoo, with The Ringer, really prior to Zoom, we put a few episodes on the Ringer YouTube channel.
Still the most popular episodes on the Ringer YouTube for the record.
Really?
Yeah,
Still.
Jimmy Butler, Zion, right. The ones we did there. So when we started 342 and we're going to do our own show, like we recognized right away, like we needed to have a YouTube channel. We needed to have a place for people to watch these videos. And right now, of course, we're just doing these on Zoom. Because of COVID, we're going to get into this later, just about the difficulties of producing stuff and making content in COVID. But how, just your thought process on putting that stuff on YouTube, and also for the network, I would assume it's going to affect their ratings a little bit. Was there any pushback from them?
Yeah, there was pushback. I mean, I think that I remember, again, that was where Les came in useful, because I remember calling him about it, because the CBS Interactive were like, we have to put commercials on all the clips. And I remember arguing with them, saying, no one knows who James Corden is. Just give us, like, the first 3 or 4 months, just give us a YouTube channel with no commercials. Just do that for us on the first 3 months. Let us build an audience. Because if you don't know who this late night host is and you've got to sit through a 30-second commercial, I might not have that attention span for long enough. And therefore I've clicked onto something else if I don't know the host. And again, I remember I would call Les and he'd be like, sure, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you think is going to make us successful, then so be it. And they backed us on things like that. I think for us, we were making, no one thinks James is better than I do, apart from James, maybe. James and I are James's biggest fans. And even we can't stay up till 12:30 at night and watch our show. Like, you have to be an insane person to be watching television after midnight. You do. It's just, it's a bizarre thing in America that, like, in England, TV's packed up by 11:15. Everybody's in bed. You're mad. But here, it's like, that's when we start spending money. Jimmy Fallon hasn't even come on by the time England have gone to bed. It's like, it's an insane thing that you've done out here, but it's the way that America has always been. But now we're in a world where network numbers, without question, are falling. You can see that in the Oscars. You can see that in the Super Bowl. Sadly, you could see it in the Grammys too. And so people have got to be making television in a different way. The numbers on network television were always falling. The pandemic has accentuated that in a huge way, because there was nothing to come to network television for like 6 or 7 months. So people went, oh, well, I'll try Netflix out, or I'll try Amazon or Apple. And suddenly they were like, oh, this is cool. Maybe I don't need these commercials anymore. And so our kids are also growing up. My daughter isn't waking up in the morning and saying, Dad, what time is Peppa Pig on? She's saying, I want to watch Peppa Pig now. And so therefore they're not growing up like we did with a schedule. So I was aware of that. We were all aware of that. All of us were, which is why we always made sure that everybody who worked on our show knew that we weren't making a show for 12:30 at night. We were making a show that launched at 12:30 at night. And that is the mentality that everyone who worked here have to go from. Our competition isn't Seth Meyers, who's on at the same time. Our competition is Ellen. It's the morning news. It's Fallon. It's whoever is out there in the content business. And they had to shift in their way of thinking at CBS financially and go, well, actually, maybe it's about product placement. Maybe it's about doing I remember we did like a deal with McDonald's where like everyone had like carpool karaoke on their fries. And like, we had to think of like different ways of how you monetize it. Selling spin-offs. You know, if we hadn't invested in the YouTube channel, then we wouldn't have been able to prove to Apple with carpool karaoke when we sold them the spin-off, which is now 4 seasons in, 3 Emmys in, we wouldn't have been able to prove to them that they should buy it. So yes, CBS may have lost a little bit of money in the short term by giving their content away for free on YouTube, but ultimately that I don't think people are going to go, you know what, I can't watch it on YouTube. I am going to stay up till 1 a.m. It's just not the way people work. So we had to use what we did with YouTube, whether it be selling Drop the Mic or Carpool or brand integrations. We had to just think about our show differently. And it's the same with COVID now. It's like, what are we going to do that keeps us current, that keeps us interesting, whether it be with the Grammys, Friends or Late Late Show. You can't just go, well, let's just try and carry on as normal, keep our heads in the sand. Back then, only care about our time slot, which we didn't do. We cared about the digital age. And today, it can't be like, well, let's just have a year of rubbish programs and then hopefully COVID will go away. It's been about, for all of our shows in very different ways, it's been about, no, let's change it. Let's work out what we're not allowed to do, work out what we are allowed to do, and totally change everything to make it brilliant. And that was definitely the ethos I've had this year with Late Late and Grammys specifically, and with the team here and there. It's like, it's how can we make this better than people expect? And so it's pushed us, but in a good way, I think.
Did you feel like your music background helped with this push initially? Because Carpool Karaoke is the sort of obvious example of this, but your show from day one has been at the forefront musically of anything in the space by a long stretch, and that shows itself in like a lot of different ways. Is that just your and James's taste, or is that a thing where you guys were like, this is going to rate well, so we're going to make this push rather than some like actors or comics or whatever?
I think it's James. I don't think it's me. I think it's James. I think that the best producers are the ones who work out what their talent is amazing at and then get out of the way to a certain extent. And so I think that with James, you've got this gifted, what's funny is he'll do these, like, sometimes we'll have pop stars on the show and they'll be doing like a sing off, and like James will have to sing a little bit worse on purpose because he's out singing them. And you're like, and people don't always expect it from him. They're like, oh my God. Like, and suddenly you're with these pop stars and they're like, see the host, and like James is like pitch perfect. And I'll look at him and I'll be like, yeah, no, you sounded very good. You sounded very good, James. And he'll know he's really like, oh, okay, right. I've got to sing a bit less. So like, no, he's very musical. But it's also entertainment. Like some shows rely on politics. Some shows live for politics. It's what they do, and I think they're great at doing it. I like our show being a variety entertainment show. I think like our job on late night is to entertain everybody. I think if James was lecturing you all about, what Trump was doing wrong back in the day, or, the Congress or blah, 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 it doesn't mean we don't talk about politics. We do. Mayor Pete was on he's Secretary Pete now. Buttigieg was on the show last night. Like we do politics, but it just doesn't need to define us. And so I think that when you're looking at entertainment things, music is something that we feel it. It's in our studio. Reggie Watts is our band leader, the coolest guy on the planet. James is an amazing singer, And then when we do politics really well, the things that have really like penetrated, public domain, when we did One More Day, the Les Mis spin-off, when Trump only had 1 day left, or when we did Maybe I'm Immune, when he had COVID and he took a drive with his drivers, those were two of our highest rated things of the year. So sometimes we take our brand of entertainment and we do a political spin on it, and the two worlds match really well. But I definitely think that it's more about James than it is about me. The success of it and what we do on it and everything really relies on him. And of course I'm a part of it, and so is Rob, but James ultimately is the man who has to step through that curtain every night and deliver. And whether it be online or on TV, or however you watch him, he's the reason you come to the show.
How much do you think about? Obviously, you're concerned with what people are consuming, what content creation matters, but how much do you think about how they're consuming it? Especially, we're talking here about sort of a post-COVID world, and so you're making content. How much are you thinking about how people are consuming that content?
I guess it depends what I'm making. If you're making the Late Show, we think about it a lot. And therefore, we can't sit still. We've got to make sure that we've got the biggest TikTok channel there is, as ridiculous as it sounds for me to say that as a 39-year-old, but it's true. And in the same way that, our YouTube channel is absurd, I think it's like 9 billion views.
26.4 million subscribers as of about 30 minutes ago.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. That's great. When it comes to the Grammys or when it comes to Friends, I don't think it's about where you're viewing it. I think it's about making it big enough and important enough that people just view it there and then. Because otherwise they struggle to, I hope that when Friends launches, word of mouth will be great. People will think it's great. Loads of people will get HBO Max because of it, and then it will be seen as a success. So that has got to be a bit of that one. When you're making Friends, you've got to be like, this is behind the paywall. Over here, something really cool is coming. Come in here. Just pay us the $8 to get in. But, that's sort of teasing them and making them come to it and thinking you're going to miss out. It's FOMO. I don't want you to miss out. You've got to see the Friends reunion. I'm going to buy HBO Max. With the Grammys, it's far more about it's not really my job. It's in the marketing of it. It's in the you have to be here on this day or you're going to miss out, because it's event television and there's very little event television left. And so for the Grammys, you're reliant on word of mouth, you're reliant on posters, you're reliant on commercials, you're reliant on Taylor Swift tweeting, you're reliant on basically everybody tuning in at 8 p.m. on that Sunday night. So it depends what the show is that I'm doing, if I'm honest. But I don't genuinely, when I first started, I used to get bogged down by ratings and I used to really care about that stuff. And maybe it's because a couple of things haven't gone right for us on shows that I really cared about that didn't rate. But I care much less about that now. And I just feel like it can make you unwell. I do a show every night. So if I'm waking up in the morning and checking how we did and whether it's, 1 point of a decimal point of, I'm just like, just make the best shows we can and we'll go from there.
Ben, I want to compare your job to JJ's for a second. I was thinking about this earlier.
As a podcast host or a basketball player?
No, as a player. I was thinking about this earlier today because I rewatched the McCartney Carpool Karaoke.
Yeah.
Which to me, in my opinion, is not only one of the best things you guys have ever done, it's like one of the best things on television ever on any show. And it's emotional. Everything about it is like perfect. It's like 25 minutes of like perfect content. But what I was sort of thinking about, and JJ and I have talked about this a little bit, is like one of the weird things about, being an NBA player is like, if you score 35 points on a Monday, like you're playing on Wednesday, and if you go 0 for 7, you're getting booed. There's no sense of like, oh, people remember that thing 3 weeks ago that you did if the thing doesn't hold up. So do you ever feel this thing when you guys are doing, you're doing the show 5 nights a week, where like you guys do a thing like that and it's amazing and it's objectively amazing, does really well, gets great reviews or whatever, and then you still got to do something Wednesday, and like rather than making a movie or something like that where it's like I made one movie a year and it won all these awards and it was fantastic, there's just a grind of doing this day after day that can become like exhausting?
No, I don't think that affects us that way because actually, if you do something great like McCartney, actually you can ride that for a few weeks. Because the truth of it is, we've got 2 sets of fans. Like we have people who watch our show every night, It's a small number, but they watch our show every night, whether it be on YouTube or Paramount Plus or CBS or whatever it is. We have that group of people, and they're there, and they're always going to be there. And then we have the millions. Then we have the millions that are there when we do something massive, whether it be McCartney, whether it be that Prince Harry thing we did recently, whether it be a Trump song, and they come to us for the big moments, but they're not sitting around going, why hasn't Corden done anything that I've noticed today? So we have an advantage in a way that there's loads of people who, like, when we first started, it'd be like we've been on now for 6 years, 6.5 years, maybe 6 years. I can't remember. Either way, 6 years. When we started, after 3 years, guests would come to the show, and they'd come into the studio, and it's a beautiful studio, and they'd be like, oh, I thought the whole show was, I thought the show was based in a car. And it was like a dagger to our hearts. It was like, are you kidding me? We do this we're on show 504 in this studio, you fucker. But that happens much more rarely now. But like, I got it. Like, we were famous for that for a while. He was the car guy. And then actually people were like, oh no, he's brilliant and has done loads of other things. But no, I don't think it's like, I think that's true with Jay, with what you do. You're and a great game on a Monday's forgotten on a Thursday. Not for us. We feel like the way we tactically do it is we go, right, every night we've got to make an amazing show. But that is for our regulars. That is for our in-jokes people. That's for the people who are always coming to consume it. But every couple of weeks, we're going to go above and beyond, and we're going to have hot hands, and we're going to do something great. And that's what we really try and do. And COVID's made that a lot more difficult. COVID has made our day-to-day show better. I would say the show that's on tonight is better than the show that had 170 people watching in the audience, because James spends if anyone hasn't seen it, tune in one night and just watch James chatting to the crew for 20 minutes like nobody's watching. He is so loose. It's so funny. Tonight he was rubbing, the guy Mark, who operates the camera cranes, he was asking him about his 7 wives and his relationships. It's like he's acting like no one's watching, and luckily they are. But that is a very different thing to a big sketch we might do with Tom Brady. Do you know what I mean? And they're two different audiences, and we're fine with that.
Let's go back a year and talk about the logistics of filming this show a little bit and producing this show last spring. I think you guys went back into the studio actually around the time we were in the NBA bubble, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, we when COVID hit, I think, wherever it is, March the 11th or whatever it was, we all went home, obviously. Everybody else, a lot of the other late night shows went on straight away. They went on. I remember Stephen Colbert, literally everyone shut down on the Friday. He was on the Monday. He's shooting it on his phone. Jimmy Fallon came back really fast. Everyone came back. And we took the decision not to. We took the decision with CBS's support, which I'm very, very grateful for, actually. We took the decision just to wait a beat. It's okay if the world doesn't know what James Corden's thinking just for a moment. They'll all cope. We don't have, we're not like, we've got to be on it. We were like, okay, it's going to be all right. Let everybody else go on, and let's just see the lay of the land for a minute. And in the end, we decided to, instead of coming back on air, we decided to spend 2 weeks working on a one-off special, which we called Home Fest, bringing people together to keep them apart, which was a really effective prime time 90-minute show that we did for CBS. James hosted it from his garage. We put proper cameras in there in a unit. We had 4 cameras, professional cameras. We had an auto cue. We all went in one by one. Like, somebody would go in with the cameras, they'd lay it down, they'd leave. Then the sound team would come in, they'd lay it down, they'd leave. And we did it professionally and properly, because there was something about our show. We wanted to, and by the way, when I say this is nothing against any of the other shows, because I all thought they did an incredible job. So I'm just talking about the decision we took. But we saw the Jimmys were doing stuff at home. Stephen was doing stuff in his office. And we were like, you know what, we're gonna try and do something a little bit different. James was the only one who wore a suit and tie every night. And we had 4 cameras that we were cutting cameras. Everyone's like, how are you cutting cameras? Because we built, within that 2 weeks, we built a studio in his garage. And so we took our time a little bit more, which meant technically we were a bit more advanced on that. But we were also desperate to get back to the studio. So we decided about middle of July, we went back to the studio, which I think we were one of the first back, really. And we just, while everyone was out, we changed the shape, because my theory is, and it's the same theory I had for the Grammys, if people are going into empty studios or they're going and playing sport in empty arenas, you immediately go, it's not like it used to be. I miss those fans, or I miss that audience, or I miss the laughter. So in any of the shows that you'll have seen Fullwell make this year, there's no space for an audience. We've built walls. That means there is no space. If you look at the Grammys, it was in the round. There was no one went, where's the audience? Everyone went, oh, this is fun. Whereas if we'd done it in Staples, you would have just seen masses of empty chairs, 13,000 empty seats. Everyone would have been like, this isn't as good as it used to be. So in everything that we're doing, I was like, build it for now. What is the positive of this? So James, we got rid of the audience. We actually, where he sits now is where the audience used to be. So the whole thing feels small and intimate. Same with the Grammys. Make it feel in the round. Make it feel a community. Make people feel part of something. Make the camera the most important thing in the room rather than the audience. Don't make it that we're filming an event and there's the audience and we're just filming it. No. This is the only thing that matters, the camera, and make that what's important. So that bled through into all of our work. And so when COVID hit, we thought carefully about what we wanted to do. Mainly my job was making sure that hundreds of people who work for us were paid. I'm talking about the US side, and negotiating with CBS, who were brilliant, how long we could support people who simply weren't working, cameramen and sound men and whatever else. And James was very generous in paying for a lot of that staff for a very long time, when CBS, you just couldn't expect them to pay any longer. But then it was about, well, let's get back to the studio, because then actually we can get people back to work and we can make a really great show and the crew can become the show. And so, yeah, it was about getting people back to work, but not just going, let's try and do what we've always done. That was the key. It wasn't about going, look, it's not as good as it used to be, but let's just do it. It was about going, no, well, hold on. How can we make this a bit better? Like, what can we do? We've been given a real opportunity to change things up. That's exciting. And that's, I guess, our approach for all the shows we've been making over COVID, as hard as it's been, because some of them haven't been great. And I know that, but that's always been the mentality. It's like, let's not just get by, let's get better.
So the sort of the lens that you were looking through as you were making the Late Late Show, it sounds like that influenced your direction that you wanted to make the Grammys. Did you have any idea that the Grammys would be as well received as they were? I mean, dude, I know you saw all the articles, but I was posting screenshots that day on my Instagram. I was texting you. I mean, it was down the line, whether it was Rolling Stone or Hollywood Reporter, Vanity, whatever. Best Grammys we've ever watched. That was pretty much unanimous. The best Grammys we've seen. Make it like this every year.
What's the question? Did I expect great review?
Yeah. Well, because you and I talked. No, but you and I talked
I did not expect
a ton leading up to it, and we talk about, how difficult the past year has been because of COVID. It's impacted everybody's life. It's added a layer of stress to everybody's job, to everybody's daily existence. You're doing the Grammys for the first time on your own. There's that added stress.
Yeah.
And we talked before, and it was you recognized the magnitude of what you were taking on.
Yeah, I definitely did. I don't get nervous usually. I told you the story about getting a bit nervous before I met Les Moonves, but that's a rare occasion. I'm very much like, we're not putting out fires. We're not saving lives. We're making average television. That's always like my chill out, everybody. It's okay. That doesn't mean I don't take it unbelievably seriously. It doesn't mean I'm not involved in every detail. It doesn't mean I don't push everybody. But we've also got to I'm quite good at going, this is my job and I love it. But we've got to keep perspective. The Grammys freaked me out. The night that the Grammys finished the year before, it was the day that Kobe had died. And I had been there for that. And I was quite involved in the Grammys. I don't think Ken Ehrlich, the executive producer that year, would mind me saying this, because he said it himself. He had a massive show to run. Massive show. Like, that show, I would argue, and I know I would say this because I run it, I think it's the hardest show on television to produce. And I hope that doesn't come across egotistical because I've just done it. But the reason why is very few things have that many viewers. Even though ratings are down, people go, oh, ratings are down 50, 40%. Still the highest rated show on television bar sport. So like, chill out. So firstly, it's ridiculous numbers. Second of all, it's 3.5 hours of live TV. Thirdly, unlike the Oscars and the Emmys, which ultimately show clips, or maybe some years don't show clips like this year, but like they give out awards and they show a clip, and I'm not saying they're not complicated, they are. You have to do all of that on the Grammys, but yet also have 23 music performances. And those 23 music performances, unlike maybe the AMAs or the ACMs or the other things, it's all the best artists in the world because it's the Grammys. And everybody thinks they've got the prettiest wife at home. Everybody thinks that they are the biggest star in the world. You can't be like, oh no, these two are like top of the bill. All of them think they're top of the bill. And you've got the added pressure that it's the Grammys, and everybody sets out to hate it before they've even started watching it. So I genuinely believe it's a tough old show. And so I was backstage. I wasn't doing very much that year. Like I said, I was watching. And then COVID, we sat in Staples, and like everybody, you start getting texts and you think it's fake and it can't be real. And then you start realizing that it's true. And then I start realizing, well, we're sat in Staples, we're going live at 5 p.m. on LA time on the West Coast. And this is big. We're going to be on, we're on live television in the home, in the home that Kobe built. And I was very aware of that responsibility. And Ken was happy to have my help with it, I think, because he was massively busy with the most impossible show on television. Harder for him that year than me this year because of, in a way, at least I didn't have 13,000 people. Mine was a bit more contained. So I said, do you want me to help with this? And he was like, yes, that would be great. So I sat with Alicia Keys and David Wild, and we wrote what Alicia said together. And then we went and we sort of asked Boys to Men if they would join us. I think that was Alicia's idea. And we dealt with that. And then I remember going to find Lee Zeidman who runs Staples and saying, look, can we cover all the other shirts and just have Kobe's? And then I got lighting to go and put a spotlight on it. So it was very like in the weeds of how we would approach this, because I felt a responsibility to those artists because they're doing big, but Lizzo's tearing the roof off. She's like going to go and sing and dance and whatever. And you've got to say to them, no, we're going to treat this with the seriousness it deserves, because so that, you can still do your thing and you can change your thing if you want, but you're going to be on a show that at least reflects what's happened. And it was important that we did that. And, that's where being in live television is like, it's a crazy job sometimes. And you have to make decisions very, very, very fast on those things. I produced the Tonys a few years ago, and that day was that shooting. And I feel bad. I can't remember the name of the bar, but there was a very prominent gay bar that lots of people that died that day. And it was the Tonys that night. I mean, and again, me and James Corden, we sat in a corner and we wrote that opening and decided how we would shoot it. And so you sometimes have those moments, but they are incredibly draining. And so I got home that night after we'd done the Grammys. And of course, like, it wasn't my Grammys, but I'd been involved in the Kobe element of it. And I remember sitting there panicking about the next year. And it was partly because it had been an emotional day, like a very, very emotional day for everybody. And to have been at Staples, and then when you finally leave Staples at the end of the night, to see those thousands of people laying, flowers and scarves and everything else. And it was just taking a walk on my own after being involved in that show. It was really just emotional. And I don't think I ever and this sounds so grandiose, but I don't think I ever got over that night in a way. It got in my head producing the Grammys, because I was like, I'd been side of stage a bit, but I'd been involved enough to affect what was on the screen. And now I was in charge of it. And everyone has an opinion of it. Everybody thinks this person, you saw it this year with The Weeknd. Everybody is angry or upset or has an agenda. And so unlike any other show I've ever produced, it played on my mind every day. I would wake up so often in the middle of the night at like 4:30 in the morning. And Meredith would be like, you've got to stop thinking about the Grammys. Just go back to bed. Like, you're an idiot. But it played on my mind because I felt pressure like I haven't ever felt before. Because the Friends reunion, it's massive. Lots of people are talking about it, but I've got it in an edit. I'm in the edit with it right now. I've got loads of time in an edit. I can tweak it. I can cut that out if it didn't work. I can put this in. I can reshoot something if it didn't work. You're live for 3.5 hours and the world's watching and they're ready to judge you. And I'm disappointed in myself in a way that I got so in my head about it. And it was only until about 2 weeks before that Corden came into my office, and it was so significant. He came into my office and he sat down, he shut the door and he went, you got to stop this. He's like, if I told my 18-year-old mate that he was going to be producing the Grammys on his own in 20 years' time. And he was going to be like frantic and like stressed about it. You'd be disappointed in yourself. It's time to stop and time to enjoy it, because you're producing the Grammys and it's going to be great. And I was like, I was like, you're right. And actually from that moment onwards, I was like, you know what? It's going to be fine. We'll be great. But it was a burden on my shoulders for quite some time. And then COVID added just this entire element to it that I hadn't expected. That like, because in March, you're like, well, it'll be fine by January. It's like, it's March 2020. I'm not producing the Grammys until January the 31st, 2021. This will be gone in a month or two. And then as it got, and funnily enough, in March, I had the idea a year before. I was like, if it is still COVID, which it won't be, but if it is, there's a show in the UK called Jules Holland where all the artists play in the round, and they have 5 stages and they play for each other. And it's always been a show that I loved growing up. And I was like, if COVID's still going, that would actually be really cool. But I never thought I'd end up doing it. And as it got nearer and nearer, I was like, oh, wow, we're going to be doing this. So I can't even remember the question you asked me. I've rambled. I'm so sorry. But probably not everyone's turned off now because it's not, Blake Griffin. But ultimately, when we were going into this Grammys, every element of it, again, I was like, how can we make this glass half full? How can we, do you know what? Let's do the awards outside. Makes everyone feel safer, and it looks so much more dramatic, and we can have staples in the backdrop, and we can have everyone sat outdoors on beautiful tables. And then, thinking about inside, it's like, we don't need anyone. In fact, not having the audience means the camera can get up close and personal. Then I was like, well, why do we need famous people giving out these statues, giving out these Grammys? It doesn't mean anything. Let's get those venues that are shut down, the Troubadour, all these amazing venues from the Apollo in Harlem. Like, how cool would it? I shot the Bruno Mars special in the Harlem Apollo a few years ago for CBS, and I fell in love with that venue. And there was this guy there who everyone called Mr. Apollo. He's 80 years old. He's worked there his whole life. It's like, let's get him to present, best artist to, best album, whatever we got him to present. And suddenly it was like, actually, all of these elements were like, can make this show better. And so when I started doing that, then I started getting excited about it. Then James's pep talk helped. And then, the reviews. Yeah, it was amazing. I woke up at like 6 a.m. the next morning, and I'd gone out. After the Grammys, I went and had some drinks with Harry, who had won, who's a dear friend of mine, as you know, Jay. And it was his first. He opened the Grammys, and we've been friends for many years, and he's one of the closest people to me. We went out and had a drink to celebrate my first Grammys, his first Grammy. And it was a very moving, emotional night. And I got into bed about 3 a.m. And then, because I had a lot of wine, I woke up at 6 and I was asleep. And I woke up and Jeff Azoff, my friend, had texted me a screen grab of the Rolling Stones, says, the best Grammys ever. And it's not even close. And I genuinely was like, I remember thinking, that is such a shame that this is a dream. Because that would be so cool if that was real. But it's a bad it doesn't even read well as a headline. So there was no part of me that thought it was reality. And I just went back to sleep. And then Ruby, my daughter at 4 years old, jumps on me at 7. And then I saw my phone. I was like, oh my God, I saw that during the night. And I thought it was fake. I thought it was just my brain fantasizing. And so, yeah, it sounds arrogant to talk about, but I was really, I don't mean it in that way. I just mean it in that it was payoff for something that I've never worked harder on anything than I did that for a year, dreaming about it, thinking about it, making sure that everything was perfect, working out the running order, that, what awards should go where. And, even the videos about Record of the Year nominees, me and my team, and it wasn't just me, Jesse Collins, Raj Kapoor, Fatima Robinson, Josie Cliff, Hamish Hamilton, Patrick Menton, like our team just worked their asses off. And so those reviews were really beautiful to see. People say it doesn't matter, but it does.
This episode is just one of many podcasts included in the Small Business Podference presented by Dell Technologies. This podcast conference has been created to encourage and inspire small businesses while covering topics like new business strategies, influencer marketing, and beyond. Learn from top names in the podcast world like Jill Schlesinger from Jill on Money, Rhett and Link of Ear Biscuits, and many more. To find more participating podcasts, search for Dell Technologies Small Business Podference on the Odyssey app, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts at the end of this episode.
You mentioned the dealing with all the different artists and what that entails and the big personalities, to put it one way, that means. So we had Adam McKay on a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this with him because we were making this sort of comparison to like the NBA locker room, when he's done a couple movies where he has the biggest movie stars on the planet, and the movie's doing one for Netflix this year, but he did Big Short, was like this, W was like this, and he basically has to juggle all these different personalities and make sure that everybody gets along and the product is good. And what it seems like is that is probably more difficult doing a thing like the Grammys than it is on something like a movie. Do you have any like advice on how to do that and also sort of like come out mentally in one piece when you're dealing with just people that have, ulterior desires, and you have to sort of bring them all together?
Yeah, don't go into it thinking you know best, because they're in those positions for a reason. So I think sometimes producers, and I see it, they'll have an idea for an artist, and they'll really want that to get, they'll really only be able to think like that. And actually what we tried to do with this year's Grammys was we'd meet with everybody and I'd say, look, this is the design of the set. It's going to be in the round. I'd really love, I'd love you. What I'm asking from you is that you perform within this space, because that would be really cool, but you also stay around to watch the other 3 or 4 artists in your part. Because some of the best moments was Post Malone, laughing during WAP, or Billie Eilish watching Harry, or like those moments were really beautiful. So that was what I asked them. But then I said, look, what do you want to sing? What do you want to perform? How do you want it set? And if they wanted our ideas and they wanted our feedback, I would happily give it, because I'd have 10. And if they didn't, if they said, if it's somebody like Taylor Swift as an example, she's such a like visionary for what she wants, you just go, we'd love you to be here. You know best. Like, how much time do you want, in the show? What can you, and she just delivers it. And then there's other artists who sort of look on you for help. And so some artists you deal with a lot. Like I had like loads of conversation with DaBaby. We had loads of Zooms. The guy's incredible, man. Like I love him. He was on some artists you never see, right? They send their manager, they send their publicist. They don't want to know. They're like, you don't even meet them to the day. And if you do meet them on the day, they're a bit like, who's this guy? DaBaby was on every Zoom. He was on every call. He wanted to know. He wanted to talk about ideas. He wanted to brainstorm stuff. It was all his ideas. I take no credit for it. But like you, as a producer, those sorts of artists, it's interesting. You like will them to do better in a way on the show, because they're so brilliant to work with. I think DaBaby's a star, man. He was somebody who I knew of course, in the lead up to this, but never worked with or had a specific opinion on, other than like I'd like some of his records. And at the back of it, I was like, oh, I'm all in on DaBaby. I think the guy's a megastar. But like, so yes, you were dealing with a lot of them, and of course, some are more difficult than others. Some are more engaged than others. But I think that often it's about going, look, this is a big show. This is a big audience. It's a big international audience that people forget. They talk about the rating on the night, but I saw Dua Lipa's thing the other day. Her performance on the night got whatever it got. There's like 30 million hits on that performance on the Grammys. And of course, you're in however many countries you're in. So, yeah, I mean, working with the artists is something that you just got to be good at, and you just got to listen as much as you talk. That's what I would say in those situations. And then because you've listened to them, you know what they want to get across. And if you know what they want to get across, maybe you can help them get that across a little bit better. Maybe you can improve an idea that they had, throw something out, show them a reference, go, well, what about this? And suddenly they're like, then you understand what they want from it, rather than just always thinking about what you or the show wants. And I hope that the artists who are on our show feel really great about it. And I think they do. The feedback we've had is people really love doing it this year and really enjoyed being part of it.
I want to sort of change gears for a second. And you and I talked, we had a lovely Zoom about a week ago. We talked for about 2 hours.
We needed it, didn't we?
It was a good catch up.
An old chat. We needed a catch up.
And you provided me with some color on this Super League debacle. And I feel like for a lot of American sports fans who maybe casually follow European football and the Champions League and the EPL, They don't quite understand what the uproar is about. So can you just sort of provide our listeners with just the feeling, because you are probably one of the world's biggest Arsenal fans. They're your home team. They're your home club. You grew up. I think there was a period of of time in your adult life where you went to every single game, home and away, for a number of years. You once had an Arsenal podcast, I believe. If my memory.
It's still going strong.
It's still going.
I don't do it anymore. I don't do it. It's called Footballistically Arsenal, and yes, I was on it for like 3 years. I used to do it every Tuesday. Yeah.
Can you just provide sort of some details about why there was this uproar when these owners tried to make this Super League?
I'll try. It's hard to explain, in the same way that it was hard for the owners to understand what a terrible decision that they were making. But without exaggerating, it would have been the end of football as we know it. And as someone who's been going to Arsenal since the late 80s, I would no longer have gone to my football club had this gone through. And I think the majority of supporters would have joined us. It was a decision made for the people who watch on television around the globe. And it was a decision that every single person who truly understands football, and I'm not going to call it soccer, who truly understands football, understood how it was the end of the game as we know it. Football in the UK is a working class game. It isn't about the top 20 teams and the Arsenals and the Man Uniteds. It's about 92 teams in a pyramid. It's about the top division, top 20. One person wins, the bottom go down to the next division. There's another 20 teams, then another 20 teams, then below that 5 divisions. And every single team in English football can be world beaters. Every single team can get up that pyramid and win the title, win the English League. And that is what's beautiful about it. 3 years ago, Leicester City, a team that probably most of America at the time hadn't even heard of, a small team in Leicester, I can't begin to explain who they were a few years before they won, suddenly went on to be world beaters and won the English Premier League. That is the most beautiful thing about English football, that anybody can take it. And that is the point. And every single game matters in English football. And the reason why every single game matters in English football is the bottom 3 teams go down a division. They lose all that TV money. They're not playing Man United and Man City every week. They're playing Rochdale and Hartlepool. I don't know. They are just not playing the bigger teams. Every game matters. Every game you go to and you care about it. And the other reason why it matters is the top 4 teams in English football qualify for what's called the Champions League. And that is where all of the best teams in Europe, from Czechoslovakia to France to wherever, Israel to England, all of the best teams play each other. But the only people who represent England in that is if you're in the top 4. So that means a team like Arsenal this season, we're 10th. We're having a terrible year. But every game matters because there's still a chance of getting to 4th. And if you get to 4th, you're in Champions League. And if you're in Champions League the next season, then you could be playing Real Madrid and you are in a knockout tournament that could one day lead to glory. If I could choose one thing to have more than any other in the world, if you said to me right now, Ben, you got a choice. England win the World Cup, you win an Oscar. I don't know, give me some choices that don't involve my family. Everything will be no. I just want Arsenal to win the Champions League one day in my lifetime. It's all I want. It's all I want. And I used to travel, as JJ said, when I was at university. And even when I was in my 20s and 30s, I flew to Azerbaijan 2 years ago from America to go to that Europa Cup final. It matters to us so much playing in Europe. Over the years, these foreign owners have come into the game and they've seen us as franchises and brands, which we're not. We're working class clubs created by the fans, created by local people, embedded in the community that they serve. No football club would ever up sticks and move to a different part of England. No franchise would ever go, hey, Arsenal are now in Manchester. It's just not the way it works. Just not the way it works. You are your team. You are your local. I don't have a choice who I support. My nearest team is Arsenal, so I'm Arsenal. That's the way it is. But these foreign owners have come in at various different clubs. There's Abu Dhabi owners in, I'm not just saying it's Americans. There's Abu Dhabi owners at Man City. There's a Russian owner at Chelsea. There's American owners at Liverpool and Man United and my club, Arsenal. And we've always been worried that maybe they didn't necessarily fully understand what this team means to local people and what it means to the 40,000 in that stadium every single week and the wider community. Because it's not just the 40,000 who care about it, it's the millions in London that care about it. And they showed us last week that truly they couldn't have really understood it, because what they created was, they said, without telling anybody, without consulting any of the fans, 12 elite teams, 6 of them English. And let's only talk about the English ones for a second, because the 6 from abroad is a different story. That's a whole nother thing. But these 6, Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, you could say those are 4 of the best teams. Then Arsenal, my team, and Tottenham. Tottenham are 8th or 9th. We're probably 11th right now. We're not in the top 6 teams. We may be the top richest 6 teams in English football. We're not in the top 6 teams. They decided they were pulling all of us 6 out of competition in the Champions League. The competition that I've grown up dreaming of one day winning, that European Championship. I've gone to bed at night crying because we're out of it. When we lost to Bayern Munich or PAOK Salonika or all these shitty teams over the years, I thought one day we'll get there. But the owners, in their great wisdom, decided actually, no. They were going to decide to make their own league. They were basically trying to make the NBA, where they would take the best teams in Europe, 20 teams only, and every year the same 15 founding members would always be in this European competition. However good they were in their domestic league, we could finish 17th. We'd still be in the European League every week. And we would play each other 5 or 6 times during a season. And essentially, they were trying to turn us into a franchise. What does that mean? Why is that negative? Firstly, it means nothing if you win it, because it's a shit tournament that no one cares about. No one's qualified to be in it. No one's won their league. No one's finished in the top 4 of their domestic league to be in it. So it means nothing. It's a meaningless trophy that they're awarding themselves. That's the first thing. Second thing is, when it looks like you're going to lose it, what does it matter? We're in it next year. We're one of the founding members because our billionaire owners decided that's how life should be. So therefore, there's no jeopardy in it. There's no jeopardy in it. And I think there's it, as an outsider, I can talk about the NBA for a while, but let's park that for a second. But there's no jeopardy in it. Third of all, I remember going to Milan. That night we won when Cesc Fabregas and Thierry Henry scored. I remember that night in Madrid when Thierry Henry, when we won 1-0, I was celebrating in Madrid. I remember those nights. They meant something, because those are the games that as a football fan you strive for. They're what we support the game for. They are live or die games that mean everything. I remember that European Cup final that we lost to Barcelona in. We were going to play them 6 times a year, each one of them. I don't want to play Real Madrid 6 times a year. I don't want to play anyone 6 times a year. That's not how football works. We want to play everybody. We want to play the small teams, because then the small teams can beat the big teams and then they can qualify for you, because that's the fun of football. That's the idea of it. So firstly, the whole thing was awful and pointless. Second of all, then it also would ruin our domestic league. And the reason it would ruin the Premier League is you would have 6 teams that had 3 times the money of all our opponents. And so then you're in a league where 6 teams have a ton more money than the other 14. What an unfair league to be in. I don't want to be in that league. I don't want to be in a league where it's just pointless. But also, if we're not going to win the league, because let's say we're 6th or 7th, we've got nothing to play for anymore. We're not going to win the league. We don't need to finish in the top 4 to qualify for Europe. We're already in Europe. You know what? Let's rest the kids. Let's play the kids and rest the big players. And instead, they're going to be playing Real Madrid for the 18th time this year, instead on Saturday. All football, both domestic and European, became worthless and meaningless. And it broke our hearts, because it was people who have taken over our clubs, who some of which we trusted, and they just categorically didn't understand what made the club valuable in the first place. They just didn't get the game. And so it was a brutal 48 hours where we definitely thought it was going to happen. And it was a dark time. But luckily, they didn't realize the power of the fan base. They didn't realize there would be riots in the street, safe riots, but protests. They didn't realize that the government would bring in laws to stop it. And then it got to a stage where our prime minister, who I've never liked, but suddenly that week I did, Boris Johnson is saying, well, they're not going to be able to use the police for games. We're not in the EU anymore, so we might not let the players into the country. They were coming up with ways of making it incredibly difficult for these owners. And it was a decision that was not born out of making football better. Don't think for a second it makes football better. It wouldn't. It would have destroyed domestic football. It would have destroyed the European football. It also would have killed the 92 minus 6. It would have killed all of the other clubs in football that had nothing to play for anymore. They had no hope. And all the teams in Europe who can compete against the Real Madrids and the Barcelonas. That team, Hapoel Tel Aviv, that team, PAOK Salonika, that team in Slavia Prague, who could have taken on the big teams. And it was all done because they wanted to create the NBA. And it was outrageous. I would just say in the end of this rant, and I'm sorry if I went on too long, but you asked me something I'm passionate about.
We're putting this rant on YouTube, by the way.
And
just broken out your rant on this is going.
Ultimately, I would say one thing, and that is that they came around and they realized it was a terrible decision. I was pleased with the owner's statement of our club. Arsenal were the only club that at least apologized. They said, "We're really sorry. We messed up." Essentially, the train was leaving the station. We weren't going to not get on it. I don't think that my football club were behind this. And I think that's important. If you're going to put this on YouTube, put that in too. Because I think this was instigated by John Henry at Liverpool, who's always wanted the European Super League, by Joel Glazer at Man United, and by the Madrid teams who are by Real Madrid and Barcelona, who are broke and need this money because they are in a nothing division where there's only 3 teams that can ever compete for anything, unlike English football where anybody can win. And so I'm glad that it came to an end. I think that the owners have been taught a lesson that they shouldn't take shouldn't take advantage of fans as they tried to do the other week. And I'm glad it's over because it was a dark 2 days that was very upsetting.
Great rant. Lots of subtle and some unsubtle jabs at the NBA. I will say that. Lots of your example to me was basically like, let's have the Clippers and Lakers play 6 times a year. You know, it loses its luster to a degree.
Well, let me ask you a question about the NBA as a foreigner who really only got into the NBA when I met JJ. When I met JJ, I properly got all in and went to loads of Clippers games. You know, I even flew to Philadelphia a couple of times to see you. Like I'm proper in. When you're playing, I watch. But I'm also not, it's not in my blood. Like you can tell, like football is everything to me. Basketball is like, it's good. I'll watch it. It's great. I don't get it. You play an entire season, 3/4 of a season, you are playing for a league position of who you're going to play in the playoffs. That is fundamentally, at its core, slightly a waste of time. Am I wrong? Like you could lose a game tomorrow. It's not going to bother your fans. The Mavericks fans aren't going to walk around upset because there's another game in 2 days, and it doesn't really affect your position at the end of the season. It's all about the playoffs. The season, like it's all about the playoffs. English football, from the first minute of the season in August to the last minute in May, you are playing for 3 points or 1 point, and it's life or death, and it's Europe or it's not Europe. It's relegation, it's promotion. And that means everything means something. Whereas I've seen fans leaving the stadiums, and often it's like, well, yeah, we're going to be in the playoffs, isn't it? Or we throw away a season. You know, who potentially, some teams are losing games on purpose.
This is what we were talking about before you got on, man. Some of the teams, without naming names, the Mavericks are playing now, do not want to win.
They don't want to win. I can't imagine
it's better off if they don't win.
That would never happen in English football. It would never happen. There was a game the other day on English football where there was a team in 6th that was a team in English. I can't remember who it was. It was a team in like 5th or 6th, desperately trying to get to 4th so they qualify for Europe. And there was a team in 17th. If they lose, they're down a division all of next year. This was the most exciting game of football you're ever going to find. Bottom versus, you know, a game 5th versus 17th, box office. In the NBA, I'm watching a game. I'm like, well, they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be, and these guys aren't going to be in the playoffs. What's the point of any of this? And that's what the owners were trying to turn football into.
You're just bumming JJ out.
I'm having an existential crisis right now about the last 15 years of my life. What was the point of all of it, Ben? What was the point of all of it?
I have a question.
Hold on. I said this to Ben last week when we talked about this, but it is interesting to me when this whole discussion about the play-in game or potentially doing like a mid-season tournament similar to like maybe like the FA Cup in England, like our league is trying to figure out ways to be more like European football, whereas like this group of owners did the exact opposite. So it's a weird sort of juxtaposition.
Yeah. And their argument is, no, we weren't affecting the domestic game. We were only talking about Europe. But that's naive because the domestic game is all about who qualifies for Europe and who gets relegated.
But But I would say one thing, Ben, in response to the thing about what we were just talking about teams losing on purpose. People are going to respond to incentives, and if there's no consequences in place, i.e. relegation, and the incentive is you could potentially get a better draft pick,
it's insane.
Then yeah, this behavior is going to continue.
But it's built your league, and I don't mean to come on a podcast that's so, because I get the NBA, I love it, but I sometimes struggle with it because it feels like it's a league. It's a league built for the owners, and it's a league built for business. And
but that's all American sports, though. That's not just the NBA. The NFL is the same way.
Okay, well, that's not Britain. That's not football.
Yeah.
And football is definitely money. Don't get me wrong. There's huge money that's in the game. But ultimately, it's built by the fans and it's for the fans. And we don't have a choice if these foreign owners are going to come and buy our football clubs. We get it. But don't try and change our game. You can't do that. That's not allowed.
I was going to ask both of you, do you think that the American owners, not to specifically call them out, but because they're used to American teams moving cities with no repercussions from anybody, no protests in the streets, league, not only in certain cases, leagues actually encouraging it and helping them do it. Do you think they were naive a little bit in terms of like, oh, we think we can just do this, and this happens in the US all the time, and even though like people in the specific city might be upset about it, there's really no way of sort of stopping it, and they were not ready for like what it means to the people like you.
No, they weren't ready for it. And some of them might have their phone numbers, and they definitely weren't ready for the text that they got. But that's for another day. I think that they thought that naively, I think they thought some supporters would be excited by the idea of us always being in Europe, whereas I want to be in a competition that I deserve to be in and that I've earned the right to be in, rather than one that I've just been given because my owner is friendly with the other owners. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I think that they were thinking about the international audience. They were thinking about CBS and how CBS would love Real Madrid versus Arsenal every week. But actually, if Real Madrid and Arsenal didn't mean anything because it's for a nothing league that no one cares about and you're playing them 6 times a year, then actually there wouldn't have been the market there. You can't take over a sport where people care passionately about, remove the passion and expect people still to care. So, yeah, I think they were naive. And look, there's many great things about the NBA, many great things about the NBA. So this isn't me knocking the NBA. It's just saying it's 2 different sports built on 2 very different foundations. And to try and put one into the other is a square peg in a round hole.
I think that's all very fair. Ben, this has been awesome. Thank you for the time. Thank you for talking about your career, Fullwell, the last year, all the things you're passionate about. We really appreciate it.
I've loved being here, and I have to say, I do think, and I want to just say one thing before we go. And firstly, I'm sorry if I've rambled for too long about Les Moonves and Grammys and Super Leagues, but hey, listen, you got me on a good night. I can't stop talking. But I think you've done such a great job with this podcast. I do. It keeps me occupied and amused and entertained and informed. And I think the pair of you is like the new Kelly and Ryan. It really is. I mean, looking at you two, it's a magnificent pairing. Lovely to see you both. Thank you for having me. It's always wonderful to see you both.
See you, man.
Great to see you, bud.